All right, Colts Nation, back again with another one. We are here today with a very special edition of the Ride in the Bench Colts cast. Now, I'd imagine that many of you recognize the face on the other side of the screen from me. If not, you are missing out. I'll tell you, if you told me a month ago that Kent Sterling would be on my show today, I would have called you crazy. If you told me that 2 weeks ago, I would have thought the same. But without further ado, I mean, here's the man, Mr. Kent Sterling. Thank you so much for being here today, my friend.
I'm glad to be here, Justin. Thanks very much. I love your work.
Oh, dude, that's an incredible compliment coming from you. Obviously, I love yours as well. So, of course, if you guys at any point during this video are enjoying it, go ahead, shoot it a like. It's greatly appreciated. Subscribe if you so choose. But most importantly, just enjoy the video. We're here to further the discussion around this Colts team. So let's get into it, Kent. I want to just get started. We're still close enough, in my opinion, to this past preseason game to talk about it just a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. I know it's preseason. You know, we can't take too much from it, but the alarm goes off right in the middle of it. We're going to keep that in. So regardless, preseason game, what did you take away from that first preseason game, and what are you looking for as we continue through the preseason? I feel the Colts are in a rare position where it almost feels like all four quarters matter. And I feel like that's not always the case for a football team or for the fans of a football team during the preseason.
We can start with the good. Anthony Richardson, I think, projected toward being a quarterback who can be a top 5 guy in the league. I thought he was really good. I thought the throw to Pierce was terrific. I thought there were read problems. People are assessing them as accuracy problems. There's a throw to Granson where I think that he thought that Granson was going to trek outside.
Yep.
Threw it outside. And Granson just stopped. The interception was a different thing. There was a lot going on with the interception. Steichen said it was his fault. McKenzie said it was his fault. Richard said it was his fault. It was probably Freeland's fault too, but I don't know if Blake Freeland talked to anybody. There was a lot going wrong on that play, but I thought there was a whole lot more good, and including with his legs when he just trucked that DB. Like that, you kind of like, oh. You know, we haven't seen a quarterback do that in Indianapolis for a long time. The not so good part is that there was very little else. Josh Downs was pretty good. Maybe Juju Brents is going to be good. But there wasn't a whole lot to hang your hat on. There wasn't a whole lot of elite level football at any level that you could say, you know what, this is going to be a really good football team with a couple of holes. This is primarily holes with a few good football players.
Yeah, and that does seem to be the unfortunate reality. We're kind of still at the time of the year where we could be optimistic about things, and we'll see if we come crashing back down to earth come the first month of the season. So tell me, how many years in a row have you gone to Colts training camp?
Since 13.
Since 13. So you saw, if my math is correct, off my memory, that's all of Reich, correct?
That is all of Reich.
That's
yes.
All of Reich. So given that you've seen all of Reich, and now this year is the first year things are different, what have you seen, if anything, in this training camp that is different from some of those years with Frank Reich?
The energy's higher than late in the Reich era. The accountability is greater, I think. The punctuality is greater. I always thought that Frank Reich was a little not detail-oriented enough for my liking. I thought he tried to be liked too much. There was too much time where he had his arms around players, and he was kind of like patting them, and they were just having a good time during camp, it seemed. This is different. They're being held accountable. Steichen is a taskmaster a little bit, still a nice guy, still smiles some of the time, still like Pat's guys once in a while, but it's not kind of this cloying friendliness that existed that I thought led to the Colts and their really slow starts. And those slow starts have got to end. They haven't won an opener since 2013, the year I mentioned. Like, maybe I'm part of the problem. Every single camp I've gone to has led to a Colts season opening loss, right, and that's got to come to an end.
Absolutely. And I guess it wasn't a planned question, but when you look at this year, we're versing Jacksonville in week 1. I mean, at the very least, we're at home, right? Do you have any optimism about that game whatsoever?
I do, and it's twofold. Number one, I think Jacksonville's a fraud. I think 9-8 was kind of their zenith, and I think they're gonna backslide a little bit. I don't think they're as good as anybody thinks. People always think that a team that goes like 2-14 and then 9-8 is trending up, and that trend is going to continue. I don't see it. I think that either they stay static or they backslide a little bit. And I think the Colts are going to come out hot. And I think that Steichen and that staff, they're going to prepare for this game like it's a division championship level game, because that may be what it winds up being. So I think they're going to prepare. They're going to game plan. I think Steichen is really, really smart in that regard. Listening to Zaire Franklin when Steichen got the job, Steichen did something with the Eagles that completely buffaloed Franklin and took advantage of the fact that he watches a lot of film, and Steichen knew it and threw him a look that he thought he would bite on. He did, and Steichen reminded him of it when he got the job. I think that Steichen's crafty, and I think that Anthony Richardson is really going to be, once they unleash him in the regular season, I think he's going to be a pretty dynamic force. They got to get Jonathan Taylor back. It's all academic without Jonathan Taylor. With Jonathan Taylor, they got a chance to win games. And that offense has a chance to move the football, move the chains, and score points. If they don't have him, it becomes kind of a different conversation.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I thought Deion Jackson looked really good. And, I had just taken a trip last week. And as maybe I'm all the way out here in New York, Long Island, New York. So I took a trip to Indy literally for training camp. Imagine trying to explain that to your family, right? So when I was there, it was a whole lot of Evan Hull. Like, I felt like I didn't even see Deion Jackson, almost to the point where I was like, did they forget about him? Because I liked him last year. But then the preseason game, right off the bat, it looked like really Deion Jackson than everyone else. Was I just there for a rare moment, or were you kind of surprised at how productive he was as well?
I thought he was really, really good, and he's capable of being really, really good, but not as good as Jonathan Taylor. I mean, and Evan Hull is a kind of a widget out of the backfield who's going to catch a ball, run straight forward, knock into somebody, and fall down. That's kind of who he is. And hopefully, and he did in this game, Evan Hull, I really think to be a good receiving running back, you got to be a good blocker first.
Yeah.
And he really did. I thought he did a good job picking up some covers that he was responsible for. So I was happy with that. But Jonathan Taylor's a difference maker. And the way you win games in the NFL, as you know, is you have a comparative advantage over your opposite number. So if you've got elite players at different spots and the other team's got mediocre players, you got a chance to win a lot of football games, obviously.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor is one of those elite guys. Anthony Richardson is potentially one of those elite guys. And other than that, I don't know where you find elite on this roster. You got a lot of guys that you would grade on a scale of 1 to 10. You got a lot of 6s on this roster.
That is fair. And I want to go back to what you were saying about Jacksonville, because that's pretty interesting that you bring that up, because I would assume you don't have the Colts pegged at winning this division, right? So you look at Jacksonville, and if it's not them, is there just a level of respect you have for the Titans? There's only 3 teams. Lord knows it won't be the Texans.
Yeah, I think if I had to rank them, I'd say Titans, Jags, Colts. But I think it's such a mess.
Fair.
That if the Colts get off to a good start, and look, their second game is in Houston against the Texans. So they could, if they can win that opener, they can get on a little bit of a roll early. They've got division games early. And if they can steal one from the Titans, you're kind of in a pretty good spot. You guarantee yourself at worst 3-3 in the division if you can win one against the Titans and win the first 2 of the season. And the schedule really isn't that withering. The Colts have something like the 26th toughest, or what does that wind up being? The 6th easiest schedule in the NFL, or kind of right in that window. So this is a team that, as Richardson develops, if they get off to a little bit of a start, they might be able to win 9 games. And I think 9 games can win this division again.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at for them this year. I think 4-12-1, as embarrassing as last year was, I really felt that was about as bad as it could possibly get. I mean, we don't have a lot of top-end elite players, but I still feel like there's enough talent here. This was a team a few years ago. We have a lot of the same pieces in place when people kind of thought, now was it a pipe dream? Maybe, but people thought when Matt Ryan was coming in, we were kind of maybe like a contender a little bit in the AFC. a lot of the same pieces in place. I'm not sure if that was your take, by the way, but it was what was going around. I know I was excited.
Well, you get optimistic.
Yeah.
In August, you get optimistic. You indulge in
Yeah.
hope. And then when September 10th comes around, maybe we have to reconfigure and, we have to get back together and decide that maybe the hope wasn't really that good an idea.
Yeah.
But right now, I think, and you're right. I mean, Quentin Nelson at one point was an absolute road grader as a left tackle. Ryan Kelly's gone to a Pro Bowl. You've got a left tackle in Bernard Ryman, who is really on the come. I like Ryman a lot. He looked really good against Buffalo when you watched the tape. Pittman, a good possession receiver. Pierce has got to hold on to the damn ball. And you got a bunch of tight ends, and I'm not sure which is the best and which is the worst, to tell you the truth. I think it's still got 7 of them, and 6 of them can play a little bit, despite Pharaoh Brown and his blocking woes on Saturday in Buffalo.
Who would you say is your flavor of ice cream out of that tight end situation there? Because there's a lot of them. I'm a huge Granson guy. I like Jelani at his size. I have to say I'm worried about that hamstring. Those tend to linger to begin with, and as you get bigger, it doesn't get any easier. So I am worried about that. I don't see anyone sounding the alarms on it yet, but I'm very worried about his hamstring.
It's kind of funny. The 2 guys you mentioned, you're justified in mentioning them. Jelani Woods is a good player and is absolutely a behemoth. And Kylan Granson is a really clever kind of receiving tight end who's got to block a little bit better. But I'm going to go off the board, Alex, and I'm going to take Drew Ogletree.
Oh,
Drew Ogletree is immense. He runs really good routes. He's got terrific hands. He runs to contact. I like Drew Ogletree a lot. If he can get the blocking part of that down, he is going to be a really good tight end. And the Colts keep making him available to the media. And I always look at that. Like, they're not going to put a guy they're going to cut in front of the media too often. And Drew Ogletree is a really good guy in the media, really big, really athletic. And as he's coming off that horrible injury last year in camp, I think he looks pretty good.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, he was definitely one of the people when I went to camp. Just his size, I mean, it was staggering how big he was. You could see, I don't even know his measurables, but you could see them on paper, and it's one thing. You see in person, it's a completely different story. Juju Brents was another guy I saw in person. I said, this guy's frame. I mean, he was in his athletic position at corner. His hands were practically on the ground. So I'm curious to see what he brings to the table. Is there anyone at training camp that people are not talking about right now that you feel like has a chance to make an impact? For me, number 50, I'm gonna butcher his name, Segun Olabi.
Yeah.
He was a guy that Olabi, in the 2 days that I was there, both days, he was really just high motor, electric type of player. Couldn't take my eyes off of him. I'll be 100% honest with you.
He goes out and hits people. And that's good. He picked up a concussion in the Bills game.
That's true.
That's too bad. I think you noticed Darius Rush's speed and length right away. One thing that I really liked about Juju Brent is Juju got called for a pass interference that wasn't. He just exploded to the ball so quickly. I think that the referee didn't see it and just assumed that he had his left arm around the receiver's waist. He kind of closed so quick and broke up the pass that I thought that the referee kind of got baited through the athletic elite quality to call that PI. Anybody else look really good? Not so much. It's kind of a you keep looking too, and you hope your eyes go to somebody that really you're like, oh, I've discovered something. And I love doing that. That's my favorite part of going to camp. But I haven't seen anybody really like that other than Richardson. And that's true in the mandatory rookie camp, in OTAs, when he was able to be there, in the mandatory mini camp, and in training camp. That guy, like every practice, does one thing where you're like, oh my. And I always stand next to Rick Venturi. Rick Venturi is a friend of mine. He used to be a coach for the Colts. And Rick is just a great dude. He was a defensive coordinator in the NFL for a long time. And he'll give me that look. He'll look up at me and go, oh, coach. And when he does that, he sees something on the other side of the ball, on that offensive side of the ball, that he would absolutely hate to have to scheme against.
Absolutely. So now when you give as many takes as you do, I mean, you are on it every single day. There are very few people putting out as much content as you can. I'll be 100.
It's quantity over quality all day long.
Yeah. Right. And you give so many takes and you've been doing it for such a long time. There are bound to be situations where you've been wrong, right? So are there maybe once?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't remember the mistakes. It's kind of like the opposite of actually playing, where you only remember the losses, you only remember the mistakes. I remember all the wins. I remember all the correct takes that I had. Every time that I was right, I remember those. The misses, I don't remember so many. But I'll think of one.
I was about to say I may have to modify my question, or I'm just going to continue with it. Is there an opinion on a player or maybe a circumstance, a situation surrounding the Colts that you were like so sure about that you just ended up being dead wrong?
I'll tell you that Chris Ballard is putting together this team exactly like I would, where he values intellect and character at a very high level. And I thought that was the way you did it. I thought you could build a championship with good team first citizens.
Sure.
And I'm not sure, given, what is he, 45, 51-1, I'm not sure whether you can. I'm not sure whether it doesn't take some dogs to come into that locker room and kind of raise the ante a little bit in terms of, violent intent. I think that maybe I was wrong about how to put together a roster and the qualities of a champion that are necessary to kind of covet. I've always thought that quick extensions were foolish, and they did that with Leonard and with Nelson, and I think that's been borne out as accurate. I thought that Ryan Grigson replacing him was exactly the right thing to do. And then you go back and you look, and Grigson was 11-5, 11-5, 11-5, 8-8, 8-8. Okay. He wasn't graceful with the media, and he maybe he didn't treat players with the respect that sometimes they deserve. But, you look record to record, and all of a sudden he looks pretty good. He had Andrew Luck, and that's a big step in the right direction. But I'm trying to think, man, and that's a really good question. And sometimes, like, this goes back a long ways. I thought that drafting Jerry Hughes was a really good idea. And then he wasn't very good. And this goes back to almost 15 years. Then he wasn't very good, and I thought I'd been wrong. Then he goes to Buffalo, and he's pretty damn good.
He was so good with Rex Ryan and the crew over there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes time with these guys, though. Sometimes it takes a while for what you see on like college film to actually translate to the NFL. Sometimes it never happens. If there's ever a player, I'll answer my own question. Quincy Wilson was one of these guys. I thought for sure, it made me question everything I know about football when he wasn't good. And I'm nervous. Now you look at a Juju Brents to bring him back up. I kind of, for some reason, my brain, maybe it's just superstition, I keep going back to Quincy Wilson when I'm looking at Juju Brents.
I'll tell you, when Quincy Wilson was really, really young when they drafted him out of Florida. He was 20, barely 20, I think. And so he came in, and when we would talk to him, and I liked him, so I would talk to him pretty often in the locker room. And what I got back from Quincy Wilson was that he was kind of petrified of being in the environment he was in. He was not ready for it. And then the Colts brought in a guy who's now the assistant secondary coach for the Colts, Mike Mitchell.
Okay.
And Mike came in as a free agent safety about midway through the season. And all of a sudden, Quincy Wilson got good. The 1 8-game stretch that he played that was quality football for the Colts was when he was with Mike Mitchell. And so I've talked to Mike Mitchell about Quincy Wilson a little bit. And that was a guy, if some guys respond really well to a pat on the ass, and other guys you need to kick in the ass. And Quincy Wilson was not a guy you could kick in the ass and get good stuff out of. And the Colts just went about getting the best from him in the wrong way. I think if he had stayed at Florida another year,
sure,
and he'd come out with a little more maturity, I think he'd have been born right.
All right. So now that's all stuff about the Colts, at least for this year, relevant stuff. I want to kind of I don't know if you've ever said any of this stuff, so I apologize if I ask you things you talk about often, but I wanted to kind of get some questions in here that would kind of maybe give people, something that they don't know about you. And I'll start simple. I'll tee you up. Who's your favorite Colts player of all time?
Peyton Manning,
Right.
which is like such an obvious pull, but and this is really what I want to see from Richardson too,
Yep.
is with Manning, with under 5 minutes left in a game and you're down 17. I never thought that the Colts were out of it because he never looked like he was out of it. He was a guy who brought the Colts back from the dead against the Bucks, against the Texans. There's a great comeback win. Luck did the same thing against the Chiefs in the playoffs.
Spectacular.
They're just about those guys. And Manning was a guy I used to sit with my wife in section 153, and that is like dead behind the uprights. So you've got a great Madden look at the field. And Peyton Manning, his last 3 or 4 years, you gave him the ball with 90 seconds on the clock on his own 20, and you knew exactly what he was going to do. And it was just bing, 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 bing. And I'd say, Julie, Dallas Clark on the seam. And there's Dallas Clark in the seam. Peyton Manning, to me, was like I used to love watching Greg Maddux pitch. It was just a joy to watch him pitch because he was so cerebral. Peyton Manning had a lot of that for me. He was just fun to guess with and fun to watch and fun to have an idea that, you could sort of be with him on the field and see what he was going to do. And that it was truly never over. That game against the Patriots, I almost left that game. I was like,
the 4th and 2.
Yeah, I cannot stay for this. I will not lose to Belichick. And then, Melvin Bullitt with that stop on 4th and 2. And because Belichick knew he couldn't stop Manning, I just love that.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, because that for me, when I think about great comebacks for Peyton Manning, that is it's always the sweetest one. I mean, you talk about even the AFC Championship when we ended up beating the Bears. Who cares about that Bears game? For me, that AFC Championship was the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? So it was always nice to beat the Pats. Question for you. Last week, I didn't prepare good enough. I'm a huge foodie. I love food. Anytime I travel, I'm always trying to find a nice meal, find a nice restaurant. You being a local, where would you say next time I go to Indianapolis, Westfield area would be the best restaurant to sit down and eat at? Maybe grab a beer too.
I'll give you, I don't know what your palate is for good barbecue.
Love it.
But if you're up in Westfield at Grand Park, there's a place called Big Hoffa's that's right across 31 on State Road 32. So if you take 191st Street east to 31, the south maybe a half mile, and then east again on 32. On the north side of the street, there's a place called Big Hoffa's that is just phenomenal. They do it right. The barbecue there, excellent.
You have a go-to order, or you just try something different every time you go?
Different every time, and it's always delicious. Really, really good. Great people. It's not a chain. This guy just does it. He smokes his own meat. It's awesome.
I wrote that one down in the notes for next time. I love barbecue. So we're going to wrap this thing up with the final set of questions here. I'm 26 years old. I'm not that old of a guy. And, it doesn't take, or rather it's very hard to age me. One thing though, with football, sometimes I'll hear about something that happened in the NFL and I'll be like, oh my goodness, that was 12 years ago. And some of my favorite moments of all time, not only do I think about the play and the game and all of those things, but I also think about maybe what I was doing that day, who I was with, so on and so forth. It could get somewhat nostalgic at times. So I'm hoping I could throw a couple big time Colts moments your way and see maybe you have a story about the day if there's something memorable that happened. So we're going to start with simple ones. These are all post Peyton Manning. I'm too young for anything beforehand. But when the Colts drafted Peyton Manning, do you remember what you were doing?
Whoa. I remember being really, really happy because I was the assistant program director at WIBC Radio, and we thought we had it pretty cold that the Colts were going to draft Manning and not Ryan Leaf. But it was a little bit iffy. We weren't 100% sure, but we reported it. And I was really, really happy that we got that right. We had a sports director named Vince Welch who got a call from a corporate guy for our company who knew a guy who ran the factory where they were running Manning jerseys about 4 days before the draft. So we couldn't cite it. We couldn't say, okay, we couldn't source it, but we knew. And so we reported it. And I was kind of on pins and needles until they made the announcement.
Gotcha. Number two, we actually briefly spoke about it before, unexpectedly so. When Marlon Jackson picked off Tom Brady to send the Colts to the Super Bowl, what were you doing?
I was really, really happy. I was probably about 5 beers in,
Yeah,
and really, really happy that finally Peyton got off the schneid and wasn't going to have to be that guy who didn't get to a Super Bowl, after coming so close so many times and being so good in the regular season and kind of developing that rep as a guy who can't close a big one. It was great to see that happen.
And then finally, we're going to end it on a sad note, Kent Sterling. What about when Andrew Luck retired? This one for me is like when Michael Jackson died. Like, it's one of these things for me. It's huge.
Well, that was just surreal.
Yeah.
That was weird because I was up in the press box then.
Oh.
And to see, you heard quiet and then murmuring and then holy, and then you saw the crowd started to buzz and things just got really, really weird. The vibe in the place went from being kind of joyful and frivolous to being very not that. And the people who had plans that night to go do something else, the guys in the media, really understood that was not going to happen. And I'll give you another one. I'll give you a bonus one for free. Is when in 2009, the Colts are undefeated and they're playing the Jets at Lucas Oil Stadium. And Manning gets pulled for Curtis Painter. And Curtis Painter runs onto the field, and I'm up in the Emmis suite. And Manning still has his helmet on, and Manning looks steamed. And the rest of the guys on the bench look steamed, the starters who got pulled. And the crowd, they didn't notice that it wasn't 18 coming back into the game. But it started, they were like, oh, and then you heard it. You heard the murmuring build and then booing, and you felt bad for Painter. And Manning just stood there right next to Jim Caldwell with his helmet on. And I thought he might run into the game just of his own volition. It was eerie. It was weird. And the entire city turned against Bill Polian in that moment because they knew it was Bill Polian's decision. And I don't know whether Jim Irsay leaked it. I doubt it. But it was somebody within the Irsay camp. Irsay lost his mind in the suite, went absolutely bonkers. And Polian, that he survived through the 11th season in any way with that team, just an absolutely stunning thing. That was one of the weirdest nights. That and the Luck night, the weirdest nights ever. And do you mind if I hijack you for a second?
No, go ahead.
All right. So you're really good.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to pay you compliments for a minute. My background's in management. Like, I'm a program director. That's what I've done. I've hired guys like Dan Dockich into media. Always told Dan that he wanted a job in radio. Give me a call, and he did. Hired a guy named Michael Grady, who's now the play-by-play voice for the Minnesota Timberwolves, worked for the Yes Network. Really, really good talent. I've hired a bunch of good talents. And you sent me your link, and I watched it, and I was like, that guy can work. That guy can do this. That guy can do it right now. And I'm only sad I don't have a position in management right now where I could hire your ass, because I would do it in a second. And if there's a program director in radio or in media watching this, if you don't want to go into radio, don't go into radio. You can do this and make money, but you are going to do really, really well. You are really good at this.
That is a tremendous compliment. And wow, thank you. So I'm a little speechless, Kent. I'm a little speechless. That's a tremendous compliment coming from you. I appreciate that greatly. And I will try to muster up the words to ask my final question for you. You're giving away a free Anthony Richardson jersey, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Why don't you tell the people how they could get that?
Wow, yeah, that is a great softball.
Yeah.
Go to my channel, which it just search Kent Sterling. There it is. And subscribe. And you've also got to go to Two Big Brains, TWO. Dan Dockich and I do a podcast every week or a couple of times every week. Subscribe to that. And then send me a DM, because I got to be able to find out what your address is. You do those three things, you're entered in the contest. And the reason I'm doing it, I bought the jersey because I thought it was a good looking jersey. And I thought, well, that'll be fun. And then I thought, where in the hell am I going to wear this? I can't wear this in the press box.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I've already ordered it. I'll give it away to a subscriber. And so that's kind of the genesis of the thing.
And then just one distinction I want to make, because I did see it in your comment section earlier. I know you're a busy guy. Where do they DM you?
Oh, on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I always forget, that people of all ages watch. And so you've got people who don't know what DM means. Saying it like, it's just this innate thing in people's minds. We still have people watching TV on an antenna. So DM means direct message. And so if you go on Twitter, if you have a Twitter account, hit message and just say, hey, I'm here. I want to win the jersey, and direct it to me at Kent Sterling. You can do that on Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want, and you're in.
Awesome. Great play-by-play by you. I'll make sure, guys, to leave all the links that are necessary in the description of this video. But with that, we're going to wrap up. Ken, I could not appreciate you enough for coming out to the show, man. All right, man. Until next time, my name is Justin.
Justin. Oh, my God. Did I call you Jeremy?
If you did, I didn't notice, but it's all right.
I apologize.
No. It's all right. It's all right.
Man, it was going so well.
It was going so well. I'm Justin. Across the screen, as I'm sure you all already know, is Kent Sterling. And this right here was the Ride in the Bench Colts cast. Until next time, go Colts.